you. I assume that you guys need no introduction? Everybody know who these gentlemen are? Actually, why don't we allow you each to introduce yourselves just in case we have some newbies in the audience. We'll start with you, Eduardo.
Eduardo Padron, Miami-Dade College.
And how long have you been at Miami-Dade?
Oh, I lost count. As president, 24 years.
Thank you. Ed?
Eduardo is a rookie. Ed Massey, Indian River State College. I've been there 45 years. I've been president 31 years.
None of us will ever catch Ed. It's an honor to be on stage with my good friends here, Josh, and all of our colleagues in the audience. I've been in our system for 33 years. I started at Pensacola Junior College 33 years ago, proudly. And yeah, thank you, Ed. And then I was here in Tallahassee for a while, and I've been at Broward for a little over 10 years.
I ask actually the longevity question not to, not for the reasons that none of them want to admit, because they've been working for a while. But really that it takes time, and that their work has been consistent. And frankly, what I find most remarkable, I'll embarrass you all for a moment, is how you have iterated your work over time. That there has been work that you've done when you came in with a particular vision, you've pushed that vision, but then you've thought about what the next stage of the work was, you've thought about different things happening in your community, in the workplace, in terms of what students need. You've got great teams that have driven things forward. Thank you. And that has enabled you to re-envision the next stage of work. So really the nationally leading work you're doing hasn't ended because you've evolved with your understanding of what students need. And I really want to talk a little bit about how you move away from programmatic or division work. So we hear about terrific practices. Actually, I loved hearing about Year Up's work, real fan, that affects 300 students. And I'm not suggesting that at that college there isn't college-wide work, but how do we move from some programs like that, which absolutely should be done, to college-wide change? And that's really what I want to focus on. And I want to start with the diagnosis of the challenge. Because one of the things I see is there's real clarity about where the college is going. How did each of you and your teams diagnose what the problem was? What's the student success problem that could be college-wide, rather than one that's just dev ed reform or just affects one piece of the college? So maybe if each of you could start there, which is any lessons about diagnosing a college-wide challenge in student success. Why don't we start with you, Eduardo, and we'll come this way and I'll reverse the next time.
Well, first of all, I think that we need to recognize that this job, yes, we need great leaders, but it cannot be done by yourself. That you need to have a team. You have to have your constituency at the college to be on board with you. So creating, a vision and the goals that are necessary to achieve where you want to go, you need that to be a process where everyone buys into. It cannot be just your vision. And one of the things that I did early on my tenure was to bring everybody together to help me develop that vision. And we created, having 8 campuses, it's a difficult thing to accomplish because the campuses have their own individual personalities. But we needed to be reminded, number one, that we were one college and we need to have one vision and one goal. And that was the theme that we adopted. And today, we constantly see each other and say, one college, one vision, one goal. And it's a reminder that together we can accomplish a lot, and individually we're limited in terms of what we can accomplish. And giving people a sense of belonging into the business of the college, a sense of ownership, is crucial. People need to care as to why we're doing this. Why is it important to bring about the changes that are necessary to support the students? So, to give you an example, a specific example, one of the areas that we recognized we needed to work with was the whole area of gateway courses, especially mathematics, because we understood that mathematics was a major roadblock for student success. The failure rates were tremendous. Many students got discouraged and dropped out because they were not able to pass mathematics. So that's an outcome that we identify as being necessary for us to improve. So we went about the redesigning of the mathematic gateway course, and also as a result of that to increase the pass rates and to also work on the sequential courses that will follow that course. We work very hard with the faculty and the support staff to make sure they understood the need to do that. So we did that by, number one, making sure that everybody had an opportunity to contribute. We experienced what most of the colleges have experienced after 1720. 1720 is the jargon here for a legislation that did away with basically the opportunity for us as institutions to require students to enroll in developmental courses. And after that, there was a flood of students into the gateway courses. Most of the students overwhelmingly chose to go into these courses as opposed to developmental courses because they had a choice. They were no longer forced to take those courses. And as a result of that, it was very important for us, number one, to deal with that issue because of the challenge that had presented faculty that had students in their classes that were not prepared for that course, but also to make sure that those students were not the victims of failure in those courses. And that required a lot of people, again, working together. We made almost a requirement to bring the campuses, the faculty from various campuses together, the support staff, the advisors together to work on this. And it became something of an obsession with the people participating in it, because we knew that we had a real challenge and that we needed to find a way to overcome that. So we tried all kinds of strategies to accomplish that purpose, and we have been seeing the results now in many positive ways, not only for the redesign of the developmental courses, because we still haven't, and we have 3 or 4 different modalities that we're experimenting with, and the positive change in terms of the pass rates of those students is amazing, but it's even being more amazing in the redesigned gateway courses. And it's been incredible to see the satisfaction on the part of the stakeholders in terms of what the pride that they take in that accomplishment, something that seemed impossible. And of course, one of the things that we do is to celebrate to their successes and make sure they know that they should have a great deal of satisfaction knowing what they have accomplished is important for our community and especially for our students.
Yeah, I think that lesson about celebrating victories, but it wouldn't have been possible if you hadn't identified that gateway class set of that issue as the issue and brought everybody together around it. So everybody saw themselves as part of the solution to that.
Well, let me put it in a different way, because the issues are many.
Yes.
Solving the issue of the gateway courses is one thing. It's probably the most important task for us at this point. But the problem is our approach has to be holistic, and there are many issues that we confront that have to be dealt with. You just have to make priorities based on the resources that you have, and you have to tackle one thing at a time. For us, we decided that we couldn't find a more important issue at that point, because it was the most important source of frustration for the students, as well as for all of us who were seeing students dropping out because inability to pass the course.
Thank you. Well said. Ed, talk a little bit about the diagnosis of the problem.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Chancellor, for doing this, and thank you, Josh, for coming down and giving us a chance to talk. Indian River, I've been there a while, as you heard, and I have to say that during my tenure there, I probably changed my own leadership style probably at least 3 times. So one thing I'd advise about leadership is don't get locked into one size fits all, because as things change, you need to change also and stay ahead of the curve a little bit. Create a very, very strong vision, which we've done across the Indian River. But as we started doing our work And I'd ask you, do you go home at night sometimes and say, I really, really worked hard on that, and I think everybody worked hard on that, but we really didn't get the results that we were trying to get? And that gap right there is one that I will talk about a little bit. What is that when you work hard and you don't get the total results or the full results you were shooting for? And what we did after doing extensive reviews and surveys and town hall meetings and working with people at Indian River is we came up with the topic that it's a culture. Now, I'm taking a little bit of chance to talk about culture here because a lot of times people glaze over. But think about all of the things we work on within our institutions, and we may be ignoring one of the major topics that we need to reserve some time and work on the way we're approaching problems, work on the way we're communicating with each other, work on the way we're developing our teams, work on, we very often use this term that everybody on our campus is empowered. Really? Are they really? And are they working together to solve problems? Our institutions have tremendous amounts of talent on our institution, within our colleges. So we set about looking at our culture. First of all, we had to identify it. And many years ago when we started this, and I went out and checked, the answer that came back from people working in the institution, one word for our culture was complacency. And we were a good college then, in the year 2000. We were moving along okay. We were good in terms of outside measurements and everything on the college. But to have a culture of complacency, that just wouldn't get it. You have to have a culture that you work on, and I would advise you, if you haven't already, to name it. Name your culture. So what we shot for is to take a culture of complacency and convert it into a culture of innovation and inquiry, or creativity and inquiry. Now what goes with that? You can't just call it, you have to act it out. You have to carry it out. So we work very hard with our administrators. Our administrators' jobs on our campus are, of course, to have a vision, be firm when you need to be firm, but the idea is to get the most potential out of your people. So you do that by working with them, supporting them with resources, helping them to accomplish and to be the best they can be in everything that they do. And when you help the person next to you be the best that they can be, guess what? You end up being the best. And that spreads throughout your institution, in every department, every unit across the institution. There's not a speech I give on our campus, nor a meeting that takes place on our campus that we do not bring up the culture. You can't form the culture, leave it alone, it will drop back to right where it was in the first place. So it is a continuous improvement effort across your institution. But people then become empowered. People do a better job for you. People work hard to be the best they can be because they know they're going to have the resources, they're going to have the support, and they know what the end point is. And that's where the innovation and the creativity actually comes from. And we're very proud that we took the time to invest in that. No longer are we complacent, but once we got that changing, that's when we saw across our institution a lack of resistance to change, the acceptance of change, the welcoming of change, and in this environment where we're getting bombarded at the speed of light with, changing developmental education, performance, pathways, different technologies every day. We're not getting a resistance to those changes coming into our institution. And one thing that we did, and then I'll move it to David, but one thing we did is we eliminated all committees on our campus except those that are required by Southern Association. And that's only a few if you stop and look at it. Because committees would go in a cave and they would never come out with the result, right? So we reformed that just with the name. We call them work groups. And to really push our culture down in the institution on all work groups, first of all, they're a specific topic. They're time sensitive. We want some action by a certain time. And the work groups are made up of administrators, as few as possible, but we do have administrators on them, faculty and staff. So it's all levels of our institution attacking a particular problem, working on that with a definite due date on it, resolving the problem so that we can get to this need of urgency and moving thoughtfully at the greatest speed that we can move. I could give you a lot of examples, but I think it's time for me to pass the mic to Jay.
Thanks, Ed. And I will say that the culture also extends to how students are treated. When we've been to Indian River and talked to students, it's very consistent in terms of this notion that there's a real customer service orientation. So that culture has extended to how students are treated across the college. And that's often uneven, right? You'll have some divisions where students don't feel like they're being taken care of. And so it is palpable as you walk through the Indian River campus. David, say a bit about the challenge that you've been working hard to diagnose, or one of the challenges that you've been working hard to, that you've diagnosed and have been working hard to resolve.
Well, let me start off by buying in totally to what my colleagues here have said and play off of that just for a second and then drill into a specific example, Josh. I could not agree more that the culture and the people that we have and the value that they bring and what we do with them to create teams around the concept and the reality of what student success means is so critical. When I got to Broward 10 years ago, it is a totally different institution from what it is now. I think there's only one member of the senior executive team that was there then that is still here today. And within first 5 years, we needed to really find a new set of leaders who believed in the change management that it was going to take, the tough decisions that it was going to take to lead faculty and deans. We needed to have an attitude of hiring deans and faculty for attitude and right fit that supports student success as much as just a resume that has a PhD on it from University of Florida in mathematics. So one example that's here somewhere, I think, Avis Proctor, aren't you still here? Avis Proctor was a math faculty at Broward. She's a wonderful person. She was a math faculty at Broward when I got there. She's now the academic vice president of Broward. She represents so many things. Developing your people within who already get it attitudinally, but they can relate with faculty, develop them into deans and then all the way up the pipeline. She represents diversity that we seriously needed in our staff and our faculty and our leadership team at Broward because of the diversity of our population and the value that that brings as well. So the culture and the quality of people that we bring is so critically important, especially for those of you who move into a new role or a new institution and thinking about that and being willing to not only say no, but to lead with urgency, even if it upsets people sometimes. That's not your goal, but if you're leading and you're going to lead change, you're going to upset a few people sometimes. So one of the things that we did when I got to Broward was really look at the mass amount of data that we have and to drill into what we call our pipeline of where we see students that leak out all over the place, or fail out, drop out, or that we push out, or we put so many barriers in front of them that they just can't get over them anymore because they've got all the challenges that we know they all do at all of our institutions. And so one of the places that we saw, in addition to, and certainly the areas that my colleagues have mentioned that you all know, there's so many, but on the front end, that largest population that we had at Broward that came to us is where we lost so many within the first, not just first semester, but within the first month, where we would actually enroll someone and never see them again because we didn't do anything to help them, onboard them, first year experience, all the things that you're all working on and that we're all working on so much. So we set about, by the way, that's where most of our minority, underserved, low-income students drop out because they're facing the biggest hurdles, right? So we set about a comprehensive approach to look at programmatic specific ways to address that. We already had a number of pilots like all of us do, that we could see in small populations that it made a difference. And it's all the things that you all know. There's really no secret magic here. I don't know that anybody's inventing anything new. I mean, plenty of vendors bring technology to us, and you would think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? As Josh mentioned earlier, technology is only as good as what we bring to it, what our faculty and our staff and advisors and others, and how we execute and use that. So we did put then in the 3 or so initiatives where we saw significant difference in the pilots or yet to be scaled initiatives, what we call our academic success centers now, where more than half of our students enroll, and the students who attend our academic success centers for tutoring and a variety of other wraparound services, faculty and coaches and advisors are in those centers with those students. If they go to those academic success centers 5 times or more, their success rate on gateway courses and other ways that we track them, we know exactly who goes to those centers and how often, their success rate is twice as much as the students who go fewer times than that or don't go at all. Because it's a no-brainer. We're getting the good services that we have to them, but you have to strategically think about how you do that. And there are other services as well, tutoring and other things that we provide.
George, if I may, I never disagree with my colleague David, but this time I will. And about the secret sauce, and I'll tell you what my secret sauce is. And I'll confess here today. I hire the smartest people around, much smarter than me, and the examples are here, Chancellor and my provost. And they do all the work, they get all the accomplishments, and me as president get all the credit. So it doesn't get any better. That's the secret sauce.
Well, that's where all my people have gone.
You better believe it.
Lenore, did you work? Were you any leader? Actually, I think you all do have terrific teams, and I'm not just blowing smoke here. When I've come, it runs deep and wide, and I think paying attention to that, I will say that we've convened. Lenore and I are both part of a group that has been getting together to talk about leadership issues through as Gates grantees, and one of the things that's emerged is this need to have senior teams where you have them operating in a way that can get the work done. And senior teams all the way through deans and department chairs. And I think that point, which is paying a lot of attention to that, and using your hiring processes and professional development processes, and really thinking carefully about what you need, and not assuming that what you've got is what you have to have in the future, but that you can have an impact on that, both immediately and over time. I think that's a terrific point. I listed 5 questions knowing full well that with 3 college presidents there was no way I would get through them all. You are distinguished from no other college presidents in the country that way. It's great. I mean, I think it's great information, but I think we'll maybe get to 1 or 2 others, and we want to leave time for questions, Madeline? Yeah. So I want to ask about, I think, the toughest question that I face as I do the work and that we all face, which is, we have very diverse student populations. And nationally, we seem to be making some progress on degree completion. I think we're filling some gaps, although the labor market connections may not be improving as well as they could. But I think the challenges on equity just remain. They're persistent. We have not moved the needle for nationally. Each of you has done important work in this regard. But we have not moved the needle nationally for students who need us most, the students who are least likely to succeed because they come to us having been failed by their K-12 systems. They come to us with some additional challenges in terms of the amount they have to work and what they have to do outside of school, and that, frankly, we have not succeeded with as well as we have with other students. I mean African American students, Latino students, Native American students, first-gen, lower-income students. And I'm curious, when you think about what the next wave of work is or doubling down on something you've done, how do we deal with that? How do we close these gaps? Because we are neither going to give life to the American dream if we don't close these gaps for the students we need to, nor are we going to meet the talent needs that we have in our country, because those are the growing parts of the population. So how do you think about the next wave of work to close equity gaps as you move your work forward? And why don't we start with Ed and go to Eduardo and then come to David, if that's okay.
One of the things that we have to get all of our people to understand at all levels within the institution is equity is not equality. And that is that treating everybody equally is very, very important. But treating everybody from the point where they're starting to try to advance them to their goals and their aspirations is far more important, and that's equity. So I think we have a lot of work to do with faculty as well as staff across our institutions to better understand that difference. A teacher will tell you that I must test everybody exactly the same way so that I am fair to everybody. Well, in that statement is there being unfair to a lot of people. Now, how we actually incorporate that into a classroom with all of the different issues that revolve around that topic is yet to totally be determined. And as far as access, we work very hard to get all types of students into programs that they historically or traditionally have not gone into. I have a great person here today, Dr. Kevin Cooper. He runs the nuclear technology program at our institution. And this is about our culture. They're free to try almost anything if it's legal to try. Don't let all these invisible barriers get in the way. Well, I didn't have to teach Kevin that because Kevin never has a barrier. You know, he just doesn't see a barrier. But in the nuclear technology program, Florida Power and Light came to us and said, listen, we need to diversify our population, our workforce. And so Kevin thought about that and came up with the idea. And first of all, he looked at the data and did the research and found out that it was math. You know, go figure. It's math, again, stopping students from going into that program because you have to have completed intermediate college algebra successfully and then take college algebra in the first semester because those guys deal with half-lives of nuclear material, distance travel by nuclear material over time. They do some complex kind of issues. So Kevin came with the idea that we would take 9 students. These were minorities, these were male and females, and they were blocked out because of math. They could not get through intermediate college algebra. So we did an alternative pathway for them and put them into the program and took them and required through an MOU with the student. And let me tell you, on the end of this program is a $60,000 guaranteed job. So that's a big incentive in itself. But took these students with tutors at least twice a week. We had advisors checking on them constantly and tracking them. They had to report back to the coordinator of the program. And out of those 9 students, 8 of them successfully completed intermediate college algebra. 1 of them did not, but that one was transferred to welding, where he's going to make $50,000 or $60,000 too, as a success. They were monitored for another semester as they went through college algebra, completed that, went on and completed the program, and now they're employed. So we've got to figure out a way to try different things. Too many people come and say, well, we can't do that. And we got to get those words out of our institution to try different things and create different approaches, and Kevin definitely did that. We also went to our foundation, who's very much on this issue, gave us a large sum of money to work with 50 men of color. And we've got a program going right now that is pretty close to this program. Is going to have very intensive mentoring. We hired 15 peer mentors to work with the students. It's going to have intensive tutoring. They also are going to be checked on consistently, and we're trying to break that pattern a little bit and see how we do with these 50 students and see what we learn with these 50 students to change other programs to be sure we get men of color through program. And one real quick, I can see you, Josh, in my peripheral there. One real quick, girls in STEM. We have a video. We're happy to share it with you. And one thing, if you watch a video, you realize what we're doing to young kids. We're not giving girls, I'm going to get in trouble here probably, but we're not giving girls the right Christmas presents. We need to give them Lego sets if we want them to go into STEM as a small child. In middle schools, we have to introduce them to scientific, manufacturing, those kinds of programs. And then also, as they get up to college level, internships where they're in front of a control board that is managing a whole plant or a whole company. And the next step is they're an astronaut, and the next step now, a moonshot or a Mars shot. But we get them, students come to us 17 and 18 years old. And then we've got to flip them immediately. In some way, we have to get into the younger ages and get them accustomed to thinking STEM before they get 17 and 18 years old, and that's another project we're working on.
Thank you. Eduardo?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to recognize that talent is universal, and what's not universal is opportunity. And I feel we have an obligation to use data comprehensively and proactively to identify the differences of our students and to be able to provide the strategies that are necessary so they are successful in their courses, in their pathways, and all the other opportunities they have at the college. Over 10 years ago, I wanted to make an experiment because I always knew that poverty matters, and we tend to ignore that. And so we created what we call the Honors College. The Honors College has a limited number of students that are selected for that program. They are, I call the privileged ones, because they get everything that an Ivy League does for a student. They have very comprehensive program of support. They have, for every group of 75, they have a program director. They have advisors that work specifically with those students. They have all kind of strategic designs to be able to support their work. In terms of the students, when you look at them, they are basically not different from the rest of the student body. Not different from the rest of the student body. But they have a very specialized program of support. The result is that 98% of those students are retained. 92% graduate within 2 years. 94% graduate within 3 years. The dream come true, right? And when you look at the students, there is no difference. Why are they succeeding? They are succeeding because we were able to diagnose their specific needs. We were able to provide the support that they need. If we were able to do for every student on our campuses, the amount, the passing rates, the graduation rates, and the retention rates are incredible. You were talking about the issue of disinvestment in education, and that is the major problem. We are beginning to see all the time education as an expense and not as an investment. If we are really serious about preparing the workforce of the future, if we're really serious about the success of our students, we need to make sure that the mentality that exists today in the Tallahassee legislature, in our Congress, and policymakers around the nation is that we need to make sure we provide the students the support that they need to succeed. It's as simple as that. There are no other issues. Once you provide the support, the students will succeed. And we have seen that at my institution, and I wish I just had the resources so the entire institution will be an honors college. But we don't, unfortunately, and that's how many students are not able to complete their goals.
Thank you. And I think, I would add that what you've learned from that, which is that holding high expectations for students, that you will succeed, leads not just to their completion, but to their going on to four-year colleges in incredibly high numbers. And I think that translation is important as well, which is that with the supports and the high expectations for students, that they can succeed at really high rates.
Well, we were talking before about risk versus failures. And one of the things that we tell those students is that failure is not an option. and they will have all the support to make sure they do not fail. And we encourage them to take risk. And the results speak for themselves. So that's why I believe, such a strong believer, that we really need to continue to push for additional resources. This whole idea that, well, get prepared, it's going to be less and less and less. No, we need to fight. I think we need to fight and just not accept the notion that we're going to get less money and expect to do more. Do more, in my opinion, means graduating the students, giving them the resources to succeed. And that requires resources. That requires qualified people to work with the students, being able to bring the latest technology into the classroom, pay our teachers well, and so forth and so on. And that's not what we can do right now without the resources that are needed.
Thank you. David.
So once again, started by analyzing our data, we have identified a couple of populations that we focused in on. Frankly, our Hispanic students do as well as our Caucasian students. We've got a lot of bright immigrant Hispanic students from Venezuela and Colombia and other places who have outstanding educations. They may face some language barriers to begin with, but they do better in mathematics and sciences than our native students in many cases. So our biggest challenge is, back to Dr. Padron's comment, low-income students from underserved areas. Guess what? They're in low-income, impoverished public schools usually that don't have the resources, all the problems we all know. So that in general is a population that we have focused in on to give extra services. And then more particularly, not surprising to any of you, are African American males. So specifically for African American males, probably not unlike what many of you are doing, just much more intensive targeted wraparound services for them, but we've engaged the community to help them as well. In many cases, they need a role model. In many cases, they don't have a role model in their community or in their lives, and so we've identified alums, people in the faculty and within the college, of course, first and foremost, that they can identify with because they're successes and they care about them. But people in the community who are alums or successful business people and community leaders who are now coming and participating in the communities with that population and giving them hope and hand-holding them and giving them internships and giving them attention and engaging them in ways that they've just never had before. For that population is also then the broader low-income and underserved population. We also had some pilots for the last several years with summer camps, boot camps, if you will, with the first-year experience in SLS courses and intensive advising, and also building in at least one, and this year, hopefully two, our first English course and our first math course, and provide the most intensive resources we can. What we've seen in our pilots shows very significant increases for that population. This coming summer, we're going to put a lot more resources behind those and scale it to a much larger population.
Great, thank you. One more question and then I'll turn it over to you. So I think a lot of the country is talking about guided pathways. And each of you has been involved in different ways. Actually, Miami-Dade was part of Completion by Design, which I think really was the precursor to the guided pathways work that AACC is doing. And Indian River and Broward have both been part of the guided pathways work in the first cohort of 30 colleges. I'm curious, how have you used this national movement to move away, as my colleagues, Davis Jenkins, Tom Bailey, and Shauna Jaggers at the Community College Research Center, move away from the cafeteria approach to the guided pathways approach with accompanying advising? How have you used that national movement and the networks to get better and to do something differently than you might have done without that? And why don't we start with you, David, and then we'll go to Eduardo and end with Ed.
So what we call our Pathway Communities Initiative, which is Guided Pathways, we used as a vehicle to implement a number of other things that we felt like we needed to be doing. And so we started a year and a half or 2 years ago with a redesign of the whole college. We were organized around campuses, and there were 4 fiefdoms of campuses that did their own thing, and the math departments didn't even know their fellow faculty members in many cases. And we're a big place, and sometimes that's unavoidable. And by the way, I'm not suggesting anything that I say that is something that should work at your institution. There is no one right way, I don't think. Every situation is different. So for us, though, we agreed together, campus presidents, our deans, and conversations on the college that we needed to move toward, as Eduardo described, a one college approach where we could collaborate and work together. So we organized around the 8 pathway communities around the meta majors, the same ones you're all working on, across the college, with communities built around our students at the center. That includes faculty advisors who, for the first time then, were assigned to work with the faculty and the deans in those areas. So now, for the first time, advisors and counselors and coaches and others in the student sports side of the house know intimately that pathway and the curriculum and how to work with faculty together on those issues. That's led to tremendous improvement for us. We then begin to design structurally, how do we support that? We have an ERP system, fortunately, that's very flexible. Reorganize the entire human capital resources and budgeting process around those 8 pathways as well. That was not a quick or easy reorganization, but you talk about building something into the structure of an institution that supports how that works. Those pathway communities have regular meetings now. They invite in business and industry and students with focus groups to listen to the students around those communities, and we have a lot of good momentum going behind them. The whole college feels good about it.
Thank you. Eduardo. Yes, to you.
This is Ed, Eduardo.
Okay. Whatever.
Well, the pathway, and I agree with David that there is not one single way, and each institution has to find the best way for the institution. But we have now a few years of experience with pathways, and there are perhaps a couple of words that describe our work. One is intrusion. We're being more intrusive in the way that we deal with the students for their own good. We have gone totally away from the swim or sink kind of mentality that prevailed many years back to one where we feel that the success of the students is a shared responsibility, and that we need to assume our responsibility. And with the pathways, what we have done is to realize that the more you structure the pathway for the students, the better for them. Because the students, and I remember my own case, I'm sure we all do, when we went to college, we really didn't understand what we were there up for. And so I feel that providing that structure allows the students to have more certainty about the steps they need to take. And that, I think, we have seen tremendous progress in that regard, with the students being more knowledgeable. They can even articulate more clearly what their goals are and what they need to do to get there. The other thing that we have done is what many other institutions are doing, and that is to use data more inclusively, using data to really base all of our decisions in terms of the data and the assessment that we do for the students. And the introduction of technology in every way we can, because technology could be our best ally. We don't have all the human resources, the human capital to serve the students. So technology, we have introduced quite a few systems, very expensive by the way, in the last few years to help the students with the system alerts, information that really provide both the faculty and the students the opportunity to really know where they are, where they are at every stage of the game. So that, it's a combination of factors that I really feel make the pathways something that we have come to welcome at the institution. And the other last point that I will make is the fact that, for all of us, the majority of our students are part-time. And we need to start living on the assumption that we're going to change that. The reason why our students are part-time is not because they want to be part-time. They would love to be full-time. They would love to be in dorms. They would love to enjoy the country club atmosphere that some of their friends enjoy at some of the institutions. But you know what? They can't. And they can't because they are poor. They are low income. They have families to support. And they have to work and come to school. And we have to stop, negating the fact and trying to force students into full-time. That's the worst thing that we can do for many students, because what I have seen is advisors trying to get the students, force them to take 12, take 15 classes. You're going to finish earlier because completion is important. And yet those students are not able to cope. Their grade point average begins to go low, they start dropping courses, and they get frustrated. So we need to somehow design our colleges for part-time students. Not that I don't believe in the strength and the power of full-time. We all need to aim to support the students as much as possible to be full-time, but not to force them constantly into that kind of a situation that really backfires. And I believe that when you develop pathways that are structured around the part-time students too, not just for the full-time students, you get excellent results when you start creating new modalities in terms of the schedule, when you start putting the courses on demand as opposed to offering the courses when the faculty wants to teach them, et cetera, that support the students, because many of them, they are expecting this course to be offered in the fall, and then for some reason the course wasn't offered. That kills that student for that entire semester and probably for the target completion date. So there's still a lot to be done, but I think all in all that all of our institutions are doing an incredible job in recognizing that the pathways have something very important to offer.
Yeah, I think this, just to pick up on that point, that when you have guided pathways, the predictability of what students will do next goes up, right? So now you have a sequence of courses, you can predict where they're going to go, you can organize your courses accordingly. Some may be offered less frequently, others more frequently, but that notion of the administrative supports, the administrative value of having clear pathways and predicting is really important. So Ed, last remark here, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, I admire my two colleagues here. Their institutions are very large, they're very complex, they have separate campuses. We have 5 campuses and we have 1 virtual campus, but we've always operated under a central administration. So we had a little bit of advantage here, I think, in implementing the pathways. Back in 2007, 2008, roughly that time frame, there was a thing called excess hours in the state of Florida where students were going to be penalized. That was our first entree into trying to do maps and do student success plans and try to do those kinds of things. And it really worked. It kept them from having a very large number of excess hours, and it did increase our graduation rates. But that was nowhere close to what we have in pathways now. So we have 8 meta majors. We have a pathway for each major within the meta majors. We are running at scale right now. We have transformed our orientation. It's far stronger and far better than it's ever been. Our student success class, very strong. Our faculty were very involved in the developing of pathways, and then also in a second professional development day, our family, that works. Our faculty came back around and identified key courses in each of the pathways. Key course being a must-pass, a must-be successful course if you're really going to be successful in that particular job that you have selected. We have, of course, pushed career counseling up front. We've pushed orientation up front, and we've also pushed transfer counseling up front. Now, we also have a new ERP. Our goal on our new ERP and the transition to Workday is what we have. The goal is one login. You realize, I didn't realize myself even as president, our advisors were having to log in to 20 or 30 different systems when they're trying to sit there and counsel a student. Now think of the man hours we can pick up. Think of the more intrusiveness time we would have our advisors with our students if we could get to that one login goal, and we're shooting for that. But very strong on getting students into the right meta major. Our faculty have developed 5 specific questions that advisors will use to be sure a student understands what manufacturing is, what nursing is, what public safety is, and we've also developed many videos to put at the very front end, at the admissions end, for students to sit down and look and see, if I want to be a fireman, this is what I'm going to do. So these videos try to take you into the real life of a fireman so that you're sure that that's what you want to do. So I think from an affordability point of view, from an efficiency point of view, we have a system that a lot of you have, but we're able to identify the career they're shooting for, able to identify the salary, able to identify what that looks like in out years. Is that profession growing? Is that profession going down? So this is going to be such a benefit, in my opinion, and our students are beginning to tell us that. As students, it's going to be more affordable, much better learning because we can identify our learning outcomes in those selected courses throughout the pathway to be sure across that pathway learning is being addressed. And then salaries and what they're going to make at the end gives them more of an incentive and gives them a purpose to go ahead and finish their program. So I'm a big pathway supporter. I think it's going to show great dividends with our students, and that's where we are.
Fantastic. And this notion of clarity and purpose that we're providing students through this work, in addition to the clarity that this notion that they really have a sense as to starting with careers, starting with where it is that they aim to go and working backwards, I think is a very powerful component of the work. I think we started a little late, so we've got a couple of questions. We have time for one question.
Josh.
One question. Yes. Jesse.
One question. Dr. Massey, this question's for you. I get to put you on the spot. Question is, were there any best practices that stemmed? So the process you went through in preparation for the Aspen Prize, and I know we go from the 1,000 and the subgroup forward, but through that process, were there any best practices that your team learned about that you were actually able to take forward and implement?
If I understand your question, yes, there were many best practices. It was dealing with African American students and in helping to get them through. There were best practices in terms of learning outcomes, addressing learning outcomes, assessments of learning outcomes, being able to assure that students are learning along the pathway. And you're in kind of a different place there.
Sorry, that's helpful. I was just wondering, the experience, basically, I'm looking for if there are things your team gained from the experience itself.
Yeah, and there's many, many more. Right now, a lot of them don't come to mind, but across the entire pathway, there were so many learning experiences in doing that. Our faculty, I think, had a really awakening when you start tying what they're doing to the outcome of the students and to the job possibility of the student, the worth of what class I'm teaching in this pathway to get that student to that particular end so that they can be successful. I think there was a lot of value within the institution itself and a better understanding of how a sequence of courses, and I teach only one of them, but how does mine fit in the whole scheme of things?
Excellent, thank you.
Please join me in thanking the panel. Dr. Padron let me know that he had to race to the airport, so he didn't leave in the middle of the question. Jesse, I'm sure he loved your question, but join me in thanking everybody who's been part of this.